Hi, my name is Eric Kimberling. I'm the CEO and founder of Third Stage Consulting Group. And I've been in the SAP transformation and ERP implementation space now for about 20 years. And of those 20 years, about 10 or 12 of those years, I've been an expert witness for about 30 different cases across the world. And most of those cases have involved SAP. Now, of those cases, it's been a pretty even split of being retained by the plaintiff and being retained by the defendant. So I've gotten to see both sides of these types of lawsuits, and typically there's blame to go around, and sometimes there's more blame to go to one side than the other. But what we often see is there's a number of different patterns that emerge in these expert witness cases. And a lot of us are familiar with the call it the classic SAP failures, like the Hershey's, the waste management, some of the big failures from years ago. And what's concerning is even more recently, there's been a wave of more failures. You have the SAP failure at Little, you had the SAP and Wipro failure at National Grid, and most recently, at the time of recording this video, Haribo, the German candy manufacturer, was another one that struggled with their SAP implementations. Now, there haven't been lawsuits in all of these cases, but they are failures. There's a number of patterns that have come out of these public failures that are very similar to what I've seen as an expert witness in some of the cases that I've gotten very involved with on a detailed level. And unfortunately, I don't think the wave or the pattern of failures is going to end anytime soon. In fact, I think it's actually going to increase in the coming years, primarily because so many companies are now moving to S/4HANA, which is a relatively immature product compared to R3 and ECC and some of those really well-established legacy SAP products. So you have a big wave of big companies that are implementing S/4HANA in a way that we haven't seen a big wave of companies deploy new technology all at once since Y2K. So it's been about 20 years since we've seen this type of a pattern, and we're just now seeing the first wave of S/4HANA transformations complete. Some of them have already completed, some of them have been successful, but there have been challenges along the way. And so what I wanted to do today is talk a little bit about what are some of the things that I typically analyze as an expert witness, whether I'm looking at it from a plaintiff's perspective or from the defendant's perspective. Now, the first thing that is probably not the most important thing, but something that's more important now than it was, say, 5 years ago when I was analyzing SAP cases, is the maturity of the software for whatever given function or whatever industry is deploying the software. So as I mentioned, S/4HANA is a relatively new product. It's not new. Companies are using it. There's some big companies using it successfully. So it's not that the software doesn't work, but it's not as mature and not as established as ECC and R3 and some of the older versions of SAP's flagship products. So that's the one thing that I analyze in more recent SAP cases is what is the maturity of the software and what is that level of fit with what the client needs are, or what they were sold. So a lot of that gets into looking at the sales cycle, what was promised versus what was delivered. Did the customer actually know what they were getting or not? Those are some of the dimensions that we look at when trying to figure out how does the maturity of software fit into the overall failure. And then obviously the attorneys figure out whose fault that translates to. We also look at the competencies of the system integrator. So what type of S/4HANA competencies does the system integrator have? And not just as an organization, but the individual team members on the project. Have they been trained formally in the new software? Do they have a number of years of relevant experience? And this is a challenging one because most consultants aren't going to have 5, 6, 7, 10 years of S/4HANA implementation experience because it hasn't been widely used for that long. So that's somewhat of a subjective area of analysis, but it's still something that needs to be done. Third thing is the competencies of the implementing organization. So the customer that has implemented the software, how mature are their capabilities in S/4HANA? And some might say, well, the reason you hire a system integrator is because you don't have those internal competencies. The question I always ask is, should they have had some internal competencies? Could they have hired people internally that had the experience? Could they have gotten training for those people? That sort of thing. So those are the types of questions we look at as well, especially as it relates to the SOW, the contract. And that's the caveat to a lot of what I'm talking about here today. These are the dimensions we look at. But each of these dimensions, you typically come up with a different answer or different analysis depending on what the SOW or the contract of your system integrator or the software vendor says. But still, these are some of the areas that we dig into with our expert witness clients. A fourth area we look at is business processes and requirements. How well defined were they? Did the system integrator facilitate a robust requirements gathering process? Did they have a good understanding of the business processes? On the flip side, did the implementing organization have a clear vision for what they wanted of the software? Did they clearly articulate those needs to the system integrator? And oftentimes we find there's a breakdown in either or both of those areas as it relates to business processes and requirements. A fifth area we look at is internal alignment within the implementing organization. How well aligned was the organization? Because oftentimes we find that the executives, mid-level management, some of the key stakeholders have differing visions for what this project is and what the goals and objectives of the project are. And that ends up creating a lot of problems or becoming a root cause for a lot of other symptoms that oftentimes becomes the finger pointing in a case. So oftentimes we try to dig below those symptoms to look at, well, what did that internal alignment look like? Were people on the same page? Was there clear vision? Was it articulated to the system integrator? Those are the types of things we want to understand as it relates to the internal organization of the company that's implementing the software. The sixth thing is organizational change management. How well was organizational change handled as part of the S/4HANA transformation? Oftentimes we find that there's problems on either or both sides of the implementation equation. Sometimes the system integrator doesn't bring the right competencies or the right recommendations or a robust enough organizational change strategy for the organization. In other cases, we find that the implementing organization didn't care enough about organizational change, didn't get their people involved, didn't do their part of being the change agents of the actual change. In some cases, we see that it's a combination of both. So we really want to understand what happened from an organizational change perspective. Where did things break down? And what, more importantly, what did the contract and the SOW say, and where were the breakdowns relative to what expectations were related to organizational change management? And one side note as it relates to change management, I mentioned before, I've been involved with around 30, maybe a little bit more than 30 expert witness cases over the last 10 or 12 years. And every single one of them had some pretty significant issues with organizational change management. So this ends up being an area that we dive pretty deeply into. And in fact, the most recent S/4HANA or SAP expert witness case I was involved with, the attorneys that hired us hired me just to be the organizational change expert on that case, because organizational change was such a big issue with that case that even the lawyers recognized that change management was very important. They hired me to opine on the change management aspect of it. The change management is very critical, and that's every case I've done so far. That's been a key area that I've dived into. The seventh area is data. Data is a tricky one. A lot of times there's pitfalls in the contract and the SOW, some of the assumptions that the organization, the client, ends up signing up for. But regardless of how that contract is structured, which is important, but it varies from case to case, we want to understand what happened with data. How was data cleansed? How was it migrated? How did that contribute potentially to delays that were experienced, or to budgetary overruns or other types of issues or failures that happened as a result of the project? And then eighth and finally, if we look at kind of the top 8 things that we analyze, or that I would suggest analyzing in these SAP expert witness cases, is the whole user acceptance testing or conference room pilot approach. So how well was the software tested from a business usability perspective, not so much from a technical perspective, although the technical side is important as well. It's oftentimes the business side that breaks down. So the question becomes, again, why did user acceptance testing and or conference room pilots not happen the way they should have, if that is indeed the case, and often it is the case? Was it because the system integrator didn't facilitate it well enough? Was it because the internal customer employees didn't take ownership of it and didn't do their part to conduct the user acceptance testing? It's a combination of both. Those are the types of things we need to understand. So there's a lot of different things we look at in S/4HANA and SAP expert witness cases. These are probably the 8 that rise to the surface as being the most important or the most common things that we analyze. But every case is different, and we're always analyzing different components as well. So those are the things to keep in mind. If you'd like to learn more about our expert witness services, you can reach me via the email below in the YouTube description. My email address is eric@thirdstage-consulting.com. I've also included my phone number as well if you'd like to reach out and discuss how we can help and how I can help become an expert witness for your SAP S/4HANA expert witness case. So I want to thank you very much for watching the video. Hope this is helpful and look forward to chatting with you soon. Thank you.